When your sport pole has arrived, the first thing you want to do is remove the packing list from the outside of the box. You'll find your packing list or invoice, easy to install supplement, and height chart. After you open the box, pull out the instructions manual and open to page 2 to review the box contents. Additional items that are sold separately are the tape measure, the stud finder, the magnetic level. The large poles are your main pole pieces. The B pole is one of the large pole pieces. The A pole is heavier and has the height adjuster screwed into the bottom. Your 250mm extension. The 125mm extension is the smaller one that comes attached to your 180mm X joint. There are two 200mm X joints which you will use to connect your two main pole pieces and the 250mm extension if needed. The base plate and ceiling plate come in the two compartments. The foam padding comes in the elastic strap or inside the 250mm extension. Tools are located on top of the base compartment and include one hex key and one straight rod. Now that you're familiar with your box contents, the next step is to measure your ceiling height. Please note if you're installing it on carpet, you'll have to add 1/2 to 2 inches depending on how thick your carpet is. Next, locate the beam or joist in your ceiling using a stud finder. Pull up so the ceiling plate is centered directly under one beam. Our ceiling here is 8'4". Refer to the printed out height chart so you will know what extensions, if any, are needed. Now it is time to get familiar with how the X joint works. Grab a single X joint and your hex key. The X joint expands to hold your pole pieces together and contracts to separate them. When the machine cut on the side is almost closed, your X joint is contracted. When it's open, your X joint is expanded. We can see that our X joint is contracted. To expand the X joint, put the short end of the hex key completely into the X joint screw. Turn the hex key clockwise and you'll notice the machine cut opening. It is important to alternate between the screws for the X joint to expand correctly. To contract the X joint, you'll want to turn the hex key counterclockwise and the machine cut will close. To assemble your pole, remove the A pole from the carry case and hold vertical with height adjuster facing upward. Unlock the locking nut by turning it counterclockwise. Do not remove it from the adjuster rod. Rotate the height adjuster rod shaft counterclockwise by hand until about 2 inches of the height adjuster threading is exposed. Rotate the locking nut clockwise until the nut is just below the hole in the height adjuster rod, but do not tighten it against the A pole yet. Lay the A pole on the ground and put one of the 200mm X joints into the A pole, lining the screws of the X joint with a hole in the A pole. Make sure the center locking pins on the X joint are fitted in the rounded slots of the A pole. Now attach B pole, lining the screw of the X joint with the hole on the lower part of B pole. Make sure there is no gap between the pole pieces. Put the short end of the hex key completely into one of the X joint screws. Turn the hex key clockwise until you just feel pressure and repeat the process with the other screw. It is important to alternate between the screws for the X joint to expand correctly. Go back and forth between the X joint screws and tighten them very firmly. We're using the 250mm extension with the 200mm X joint. Put the contracted X joint into the top of main B pole. Then put the 250mm extension, aligning the whole of the extension with the X joint screw. Make sure there is no gap between the pole pieces. Repeat the same process used to connect the main pole pieces by turning the hex key clockwise and alternating between the screws to expand the X joint properly. You may need to push the two pole pieces together as you tighten the screws. Put the upper support plate onto the B pole or top extension, making sure pins of the upper plate line up with the rounded slots of the B pole or the upper extension. Slide the height adjuster, which is at the bottom of A pole, into the articulating base. Lift the pole upright. Insert the straight rod into the height adjuster hole and hold the rod so it does not turn. Rotate the pole counterclockwise to expand the pole. When the upper support plate is fairly tight to the ceiling, make sure the pole is level. Magnetic levels are easiest to use by walking around the entire pole. If it is unlevel, adjust the pole by moving the lower part of the A pole and the base. Keep turning the rod until the plate is firmly tight to the ceiling. You do not want to over-tighten, but the plate should not move. Do final check of pole stability by shaking back and forth and make sure the upper support plate doesn't move. Turn locking nut counterclockwise by hand so the nut rises up the adjuster rod. When it reaches the bottom of A pole, put straight rod in the locking nut hole, hold the A pole and turn counterclockwise until it is firmly tight to the bottom of the A pole. Keeping the locking nut tight to the bottom of the A pole is the most important step to make sure your pole is stable. If necessary, cut foam to cover the height adjuster threads. Now you are ready to use and enjoy your sport pole. If you are planning to leave your pole up for an extended period of time, make sure your locking nut is always tight to maintain pole stability, and clean your pole with rubbing alcohol. To disassemble your sport pole, put the straight rod in the locking nut hole and turn clockwise to unlock the nut. Use your hand to unscrew the nut to just below the adjuster hole. Put straight rod in adjuster hole and turn counterclockwise until the ceiling plate is barely loose. Then hold the rod with your foot and turn entire pole clockwise to lower the ceiling plate from the ceiling. Lay the entire pole on the ground, remove the ceiling plate and the base. Use the large hex key to contract all X joints by turning hex key counterclockwise. Then separate all pole pieces from the X joints. Pack your pole in the carry case by putting the largest pole pieces on the edges and the smaller pieces in between.